guys, Caitlin here. Today we're going to talk about RightStart Math Level D. I'm going to do a quick review of this for you. If you are new here, by the way, my name's Caitlin. I am a homeschool mom of 4. We have used RightStart Math since my oldest was in kindergarten. So he has done A, B, C, and then just finished D for his 3rd grade year. So I've done review videos of all the other levels. I have other RightStart Math videos, so there's a whole playlist, so check that out if you are curious. My assumption is that most of you who are watching this video have already used RightStart Math in the past and are just curious about maybe the level that you'll be doing next year. If you have not used RightStart Math, you may want to go back and see some of the other ones so you can kind of get a feel for it, but I'm assuming most of you have seen it, so this is very similar to previous levels as far as what it looks like inside and how the lessons are structured. And I will turn the camera around and show you the insides of it and do a flip through with you. But it's not like anything revolutionary and crazy. So I'm just gonna show you a little bit what's in it, give you kind of an overview, talk about some things we liked, some things that we struggled with, that kind of stuff, just to kind of get you prepared for when you guys start level D. So this is kind of their version of like 3rd grade math, assuming you start with A in kindergarten, B in 1st, C in 2nd, then you would do D in 3rd grade. Of course, you know, that can definitely depend on your child, and that's the beauty of why so many of us homeschool. They could be doing it earlier or later. But the reason I tell you that is like the main concept taught in D is multiplication. So you do a lot of addition in A and in B. In C, you do a lot of subtraction, and in D, you do a lot of multiplication. So it starts off with, I think there's 8 review lessons that just kind of review previous things from past levels, past years. So depending on your child, you can just skim through that, skip over it completely. You may need to spend some time there. But then once it starts with like the first non-review lesson, you just jump straight into multiplication. And you know, just like all the levels of RightStart, you will learn more conceptually, like what multiplication is, how to do it, you know, different ways of thinking about it. But you're going to be starting right in on multiplication. And they don't go in order as far as like 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't really remember from when I was in 3rd grade. That was like a lot of years ago. But I feel like we learned them in order because back then, or at least where I went to school, you just kind of memorize your multiplication tables and moved on. RightStart does it a little more, like they try to connect different numbers with different facts, that kind of stuff. So let's see, I have some notes here. So you do the 2s, then the 4s, and the 8s, and then the 10s and the 9s together, and then you go back and do some of the other ones and fill them in. So you do multiplication for like the first 30 or so lessons. And with RightStart, at least in this level, you learn up to 10 times 10. Okay, so there's no 11s or 12s or anything past that, at least at this point. So by lesson 28, you have filled in a whole entire multiplication table, so you know all of your multiplication facts. In lesson 33, you learn this short multiplication table, which I'll talk about again in a little bit in a second. And that's kind of like you've reached the end of multiplication. Now you're going to keep multiplying through the whole entire book, but by lesson 33, you've kind of established all the multiplication facts, and then you just continue practicing those throughout the rest of the book. Now, if I can give some advice, a tip, that is to play the games. I know that's like, duh, that's part of the curriculum. It's written in there to play the games. But I know from my own experience and from talking to other parents, sometimes we just kind of start to skip the games at the end, right? That is where your child gets the multiplication practice. We don't have tons of worksheets. Like RightStart does not have you doing like timed multiplication tests and reciting the facts and things that are more traditional ways to learn multiplication. So really the way you get the most practice is by doing the games. And if you don't do the games, your child's not going to get a whole lot of practice. Ask me how I know. That's from personal experience. Okay, so before we move on, I want to camp out here at this multiplication thing for a second. So I'm in at least one, maybe a couple of RightStart Math Facebook groups. And this is something that I see come up a lot. A lot of kids finish RightStart Math, not like finish everything, finish level D, or get through the multiplication section of D and do not have their multiplication facts memorized. So there's different lines of thinking on this. Some people say you should not pause and memorize the facts. You need to trust the process. You need to keep going. The more they continue to do their problems, that's incorporated with other stuff, then eventually they'll learn them. Then there are other people who are like, I don't feel like RightStart really helped my kid memorize their multiplication, and so I'm gonna pause and we're gonna do something separate to memorize all the multiplication facts before we move on. Okay, so here's my story, just from my perspective. So we did the multiplication up through whatever I told you, like lesson 33, and we got to it's called the short multiplication table, and it's basically kind of like a cheat sheet, not in a bad way, but just a cheat sheet that has the multiplication on there. And we got to that point and he did not have them memorized. Now, I did not do a good job of playing the games with him every single lesson or repeating the games frequently. This year was a hard year for us. I have a toddler who is a lot, and he requires a lot of my attention. He gets into everything, and so we kind of did the bare minimum this year, and things suffered. And one of those was playing things like games, because getting cards out that he could reach and having lessons that took a long time, it was just not feasible. And so that kind of went by the wayside. So I'm not blaming RightStart for that. That's on me that I didn't play the games to reinforce those problems with my son. But anyway, so we got to, this is the short multiplication table. It's like half of a full multiplication table, but it has all the facts on it. And so they teach the kids how to use this. So they provide this short multiplication table in, it's like the back of the book or the appendix or something. So I laminated it, and there was like a couple of them, but I cut them out so that he could use these as a tool as we were doing the problems, because he did not have the facts memorized. That was what people, so it does not say that in the book that I remember reading. It's very possible that I skipped over an instruction to the parent, the teacher or something, but I never saw it say that in the book. But I saw in the Facebook group, people said, if you get to lesson 33 and they have their little short multiplication table and they don't have their facts memorized yet, let them keep using this as long as they need to until they have the facts memorized. So I'm like, okay, we don't have them memorized. We hadn't really practiced memorizing, we did the lessons and then moved on to the next set of facts. We did not slow down and memorize. So we got to this, and obviously he did not have it memorized. So I printed this out and laminated it, and we just kept using it through the end of the year. Around Christmas time, I'd said, in my head, I was like, okay, if he doesn't have the multiplication facts memorized by Christmas, then we do Christmas school. We take a break in December. We do school, but we don't use our curriculum. And I thought, well, we'll do some multiplication stuff then. So we got to Christmas and he did not have them memorized. So I didn't do a whole separate curriculum or anything, or multiplication, curriculum's not the word, but another outside of RightStart thing to help with multiplication. I just sat down and made a list of the RightStart games, the ones that we had skipped back whenever we were originally going through the lessons. And I spent a lot of time reading on the blog and reading in the book and watching the videos that RightStart has scattered at different places to try to figure out how to play the games, because that's one reason why I don't always play the games, is sometimes trying to figure out what it's telling me to do every single day, it gets overwhelming, and so I skip through it. Anyway, so over our Christmas break, we played a bunch of games about factors and multiples and multiplication, that kind of stuff, but we still didn't really work on multiplying, memorizing the multiplication. And there are some RightStart purists, I guess, who say you should never have your kid memorize multiplication tables. You should always have them figure out conceptually how to do it until it becomes naturally memorized. And there are some who believe that, and if that's you, hey, good, you do you. But at the end of this, back up. We go through Christmas, we do the multiplication games. you know, it was good practice, but it still was not memorization or mastery, if you want to say that instead of memorizing. So we come back from Christmas, we continue with level D. He used this because nearly every lesson has a warm-up at the beginning that has multiplication in it. So he used this and he did very, very well with all the rest of D, but if I took this away, things would not go well. He did not have the multiplication facts memorized. So we finished D, all is well, but I personally am not comfortable moving on with him not having those memorized. So for our family, I've made the decision over this summer to use a different program to really nail down the multiplication facts. Now, we are using multiplication facts that stick. It is very RightStart-ish. Yes, it does focus on one set of facts or sometimes two, depending on the week, for like a whole week, but you're learning with play, with games. It's still not just like memorize. It's like a little bit of both. It's a mix of both. So that's what we're trying this summer. There are others that have been recommended. Times Tails is one. I think there's another one that I can't remember off the top of my head, but that are really popular because it's very common. Okay, I know that was super long. I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say is it is very common for students to go through RightStart Math Level D and get to the end of it and not have their multiplication facts memorized. So I'm sorry. I said all that stuff and I probably could have just said that one little snippet. I just want you to know that going into it, your child may not have their multiplication facts memorized by the time they get to D if you just follow on the curriculum the way I did, especially if you don't do the games as much as like it says to do. And even if you do, they still may not. That's very common. It happens to a lot of families. Then it's up to you. You can decide from that point, do I want to just keep going into level E and assume that they're going to get it at some point, or do I need to take a break like I'm doing in between D and E, or like a lot of people will just stop after the multiplication unit in level D, like so back in the fall, take a break, do something else, get all the multiplication facts memorized, and then go back to D. So there's different ways. So having gone through it, I'm not sure what I'll do with my next child. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that. I'm gonna see how this summer goes. But right now I'm kind of leaning towards like taking a pause earlier in the school year and doing the multiplication facts that stick or some other type of multiplication thing to get those memorized. That way they can go all through D and they continue practice their multiplication, not having to use the table. Nothing wrong with the table. It works fine. It's good. It's a good visual and it does help conceptually, but I don't know there's a right way. I know there's not a right way. It's whatever works for your family. I don't even know which is the best way for our family. So I will have to think about that as my second born goes into it like in 2 years. But anyway, that was really long. I'm sorry. That was just, I feel like it's a big sticking point for level D, something that a lot of families struggle with. And I wanted to make sure that you just knew it going into it. You may not have the multiplication facts mastered after D, because of the way RightStart teaches it, and that's okay. And you can choose how you want to handle that with either a separate curriculum alongside it, separate, take a break, wait till after the summer, or just keep going into level E. So anyway, that's kind of like my main thing. We actually really loved D. The fact that he had this and was able to use this like made it very easy for him because he didn't have to memorize a lot of stuff. Had we done it differently, it might have been a harder level for him, but I felt like D was a really good level. We learned a lot of good stuff. The multiplication wasn't great. Part of that was my own fault because like I said, I didn't like dive in quite as much as I should have. And then part of it is just, I think the way RightStart Math teaches that. So anyway, let's move on from that. Some other things that are covered in level D. Rounding, like 6-digit numbers and larger. There's this thing called check numbers. It is really cool. And I had heard about this in the Facebook group also. I didn't know what it was, but I'd heard people reference it. So it is just a way of, I don't even know how to explain it. And if I can find a video to link that explains it on the RightStart blog, I will link that so you can see what that is. It's just a way to check your work, basically, but it's this very, I think, very cool, very, very elegant math concept that you can use to check these large problems. I am a former math teacher. My husband is an engineer. Neither of us had ever seen or heard of this. We both thought it was really cool. My son picked it up very quickly and enjoyed it. I know from the Facebook group, some people really don't like check numbers and complain about them, but they worked really well for us. They were good practice, and you know, because you're multiplying and you're adding and subtracting to check those, and you'll understand it more once you actually get to that in the lesson, or like I said, if I can link a video, they'll explain it. But I thought it was a really cool trick, a really cool tool. But the reason I'm kind of talking about it is don't skip that section. Because if you get to that and you're like, I don't exactly understand what this is talking about, so we're just gonna move on, because sometimes we do that, and that's okay. But I'm just gonna let you know, check number shows up in like every single lesson for the whole rest of the curriculum. So take some time to figure out check numbers, even if you have to slow down for a day or two, watch some other videos, that kind of thing, because you need it going forward. It's not one of those concepts, because sometimes RightStart will introduce a concept and it's literally like 1 or 2 lessons and then you never talk about it again. That is not one of those. You are going to see it again. So check numbers, take your time, figure it out, go to outside sources if you need a little bit of help, which, you know, I don't think so. I think it's pretty well explained in the curriculum, but just don't skate over it, because you are going to keep seeing that. Okay, multiplying multiples of 10, so things like 20 times 10 or 7 times 100, multiplying multi-digits. So mostly it's like a 3 or 4 digit number times a 1 digit number. We do that a lot. That is like the warm up for tons and tons of lessons for the whole rest of the year. And so they do a lot of that. Fractions, they talk about like multiples and patterns that you see in the multiples, a little bit of calendar stuff, measurement. There's lots of area and perimeter. Now that they've learned multiplication, then they take those, you know, what they've learned at the beginning of the year about multiplication and start applying it to area and perimeter. So there's quite a bit of that. There's some time, you know, clocks, that kind of stuff. And then the very end is a lot of drawing, similar to what we saw in C. So if you've done C already, kind of the same idea. In fact, there's a couple of drawing review lessons in the middle of the curriculum. And my son was like, we did this last year. Why are we doing this again? It was just like 2 or 3 review lessons. And then we went into more drawing. So with the, you know, the angles and the drawing board and that kind of stuff. So that kind of finishes up your level D. There are reviews and assessments throughout the book. I didn't count to see like how many lessons, but it's definitely more than have been in previous levels. So you'll do, you know, they don't call them units or anything, but basically like a unit and then a review and an assessment and then another unit, review and assessment. And then at the end, just like with the other lessons, the other levels, there are several reviews and several assessments to finish out the year. So in a nutshell, it's very similar to all the other levels. I just kind of really wanted to talk about the multiplication part of it, because that was something that is good to know. I didn't want to be like negative and say it didn't work well for our family. It's just something that's good to know, that not everybody masters multiplication in this level and you may need to supplement. So anyway, all right, I'm going to flip the camera around and just do a quick flip through so you can kind of see what it looks like. Not anything different really from past years, but just do that real quick so you can see that, and then that'll finish us up. Okie doke. So here is the student worksheet book. They get a little bit bigger every single year, because as your child gets older, they have them do more worksheets. But here is the teacher book, and this is just review at the beginning. Let's see. So here's kind of where it's getting into multiplication. So multiplying by 2 and 4, 1, multiples of 1, of 8, commutative property, multiples of 5. I'm skipping some of these. So there's 3, there's 6. So you can see one multiplication fact per day, basically. So they're going very quickly. Yes, it has the games recommended, but you're just doing it one day and then moving on. So I think that's part of where, that was a sticking point for us, because we just didn't camp out and spend a lot of time on those. So by this point, lesson 28, you are filling in this whole 10 by 10 multiplication table. And so this is what I was talking about, the short multiplication table. This is a really cool tool that I've never seen. I've seen this, you know, 10 by 10 a billion times as a math teacher, but had not seen this short one, which is like half of it. And it gives like little tricks to how to figure out your multiplication facts on there. And that's a neat little tool. I liked that. But anyway, so that was kind of the end of multiplication. And then you move into, I mean, you're still multiplying, but there's 1 or 2 calculator lessons. I think if you've watched my videos before, you know I do not like the calculator lessons and we skip them. So I think this level had 2, where some levels have just had 1. But anyway, there you get into rounding. You see, this is review, and sometimes there's a review and an assessment. So large numbers, billions, remainders. Okay, so we introduce remainders just a little bit, and there's very little division, because that kind of leads into check numbers. So there's check numbers here, 54, and then you'll use that ongoing through the rest of the level. Oh, this enrichment lesson. I see this one in the Facebook group all the time. It's like this humongous giant Pascal's triangle thing that gets made. We didn't do it. We might do it another time. But like I mentioned, it was a hard year. It was just one of those years that was rough, and we kind of did the bare minimum. I'd like to go back and do that someday, but we just did not this time. So anyway, so the warm up for the whole rest of the book basically is, you're gonna do, here you're doing subtraction problems and you're practicing your check numbers. Let's see, well, okay, they're not all the warm-ups, I lied. There's other warm-ups too, but a lot of multiplication with your check numbers, multiplication, a subtraction, and an addition problem, and then the check numbers to go with all of those. Same thing there, same thing there. You see that a lot. It's not the only warm up, but you see kind of that pattern a lot. So this is why I was saying, like, that check numbers, it keeps coming up over and over and over again. So make sure you nail that down. There it is again, lesson 100. There it is again, lesson 105. So anyway, perimeter and area, graphing. So I've skipped through a lot of it because, you know, it's like 140 lessons. There's money, just give you some overview. I think this lesson 121 is where we start drawing, and we do that to finish out the year until you get to the reviews and the assessments. So that's a couple weeks of that. And that is about it. And then there's the end, which is your, you know, it gives you a review, games, assessment. Oh, actually, this one does the review, the games, and all the assessments are at the end, I believe. But anyway, kind of the same as past years. So that is that. Hope that helps as you're getting ready for level D.